look ahead to the upcoming legislative session. I'm Jill Horner. This is Comcast Newsmakers. With me is Pennsylvania State Representative Stephen Bloom. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Jill.
Let's talk about some of the main items on the agenda. Obviously, always dealing with the budget as part of the legislative process. But in addition to that, there are a variety of other items on the agenda, including one that we've discussed in the past, the pension situation.
Yeah. The way I see it, I think there's going to be three really primary issues as we head into the 2013-2014 session. One of them is pension reform, and we have talked about that before, and it's a real problem, and it hasn't been addressed yet. It's consuming a bigger and bigger share of our budget, making it more and more difficult for us to fund the other core functions that the government does have to fund. So pensions are first and foremost in my mind. We need substantial pension reform. It's got to be addressed. We can't let this continue to drag on. Another big area that we're going to be addressing is transportation funding. You've heard a lot about that over the last 2 years, but really nothing's been done to address the situation. And then the third area is one that I haven't heard so much from the Harrisburg set, the inside the government status quo folks, but really property tax reform is something I hear about constantly from my constituents, and there are a number of legislators that have been working very hard on that issue. And I believe that's going to resurface also in the 2013-2014 session.
So let's talk first then about property taxes. There was a select committee put together. This was a bipartisan committee that was dealing specifically with property tax reform. They've put forward their findings, and this was a select committee. Their findings now go forward back to standing committees to look at bills, look at potential solutions when it comes to property tax reform. What then happens in the new session?
Right. We've got bills, for example, House Bill 1776 that was introduced in the last session. I know that I've talked to the prime sponsor of that bill. It's going to be reintroduced in the new session. It went through analysis by the Independent Fiscal Office. The numbers that were used in the previous version didn't quite match up to make it tax neutral and substitute a mix of sales and income tax for the current school tax revenue that supports our public schools. So we're going to be tweaking that bill, adjusting it in accordance with the Independent Fiscal Office recommendations and the Select Committee's recommendations. And they're going to look at other issues, too, with regard to school property tax. And again, it's very important for Pennsylvania citizens, the arbitrary and confiscatory nature of the property tax and how it singles out, especially oftentimes our older homeowners who are on a fixed income, and really puts an unfair chunk of the burden for funding schools on them. So that's important, and it's going to have to be readdressed here in the upcoming session.
In addition to that, transportation and infrastructure funding has been an issue that's been discussed for a number of years now. The governor had a committee, and they put a report together. This wasn't addressed as part of the budget last year. Will it be addressed during this session?
Well, certainly everybody's talking about transportation funding. The governor's talking about it. The legislative leaders, both in the House and Senate, are talking about it. It's an urgent issue. It's a core infrastructure requirement that's going to help our economy. If our roads and bridges fall apart, it makes it very difficult for us to grow jobs and build a strong economy. So it's got to be addressed. The question is, how do we do it? There's a lot of talk of raising revenue, new revenue to fund transportation, but I think we need to be very careful in that regard, not to allow ourselves to go down the path of bigger government and higher taxes and higher fees. We've got to look at alternative revenue sources. Perhaps, for example, the governor's talked about the sale of the state liquor control board system. If we can sell off those assets, we could use that money to fund transportation, building bridges and highways, and preserving our infrastructure without getting putting a larger tax burden on our hardworking taxpayers.
Come back, give us an update. Let us know how this is all progressing.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks. We've been talking with Pennsylvania State Representative Stephen Bloom. I'm Jill Horner.